name is Kim Anderson. I'm with Lone Star College, University Park. So welcome everybody. This presentation that I'm going to share with you, I have actually created a series of Excel trainings that I started giving and putting out before COVID hit. And I've had to, of course, put those on hold, but these are snippets and stuff from those trainings that I have previously developed. So earlier I did a session for those that attended called Beyond the Basics, and then this one is stepping it up a little bit more advanced. And some of the areas that I get a lot of questions about, I decided to put them in there, like VLOOKUP. How do you use VLOOKUP? What do you use it for? Type thing. So I have been using spreadsheet software since before Excel existed. I looked it up. Excel went live in 1987. I've been using it since it began. But I started out on spreadsheet software using Lotus 123. So I've been using spreadsheet software for a number of years. I use it every day in my job. I'm currently an analyst, so I use it all the time. Anyway, I did present last year at HEAPCON. Of course, it was face-to-face. I presented 2 sessions, but these are a little bit different from what I presented last year. So again, welcome. I want to welcome and thank our host, Lori, for helping me out here. She's helping me by monitoring the chat once I start sharing, because then I can't really see the chats come through. So cue housekeeping. Everybody's muted, but if you have a question, you can put your question in chat, or you may raise your hand and we'll call on you and we'll unmute you and you can ask your question that way. Please use the emojis. Stay engaged, be engaged. Don't hesitate to ask questions, and we'll go from there. So let me share my screen. Thank you, Latricia. That's sweet. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Yep, okay, good. Okay, so again, I've titled this one Stepping It Up with Microsoft Excel. The topics we're going to talk about today, we're going to discuss filters, what you can do with filters. We're going to talk about conditional formatting and how that can benefit you, data validation, and then we're going to get into a number of advanced functions, including VLOOKUP, left, right, subtotal, concate or concatenate, and then some nested functions and formulas, whether they're mathematical or conditional. So I'm just going to jump in. Okay, so filters, I don't know how many of you are aware and familiar with filters, but filters can be used to narrow down your clean data. And I say clean data because as I talked about in my last session, you want to make sure your data is clean before you start trying to analyze it, sort it, pivot tables, filters, whatever you want, because if you don't have clean data, your results are going to be skewed. So you can filter your clean data in your worksheet. You can hide parts of it from view, and you can do that without having to hide the row or hide the column. Filtering allows you to qualify and display only the data that interests you or that you need to look at. You use auto filter, and you can use built-in comparison operators like greater than or top 10 in Excel to show specific data. Now, once you apply a filter, you can reapply a filter to get up-to-date results. You can do filter within a filter. You can filter multiple columns of data to narrow your data down, or to narrow it down to something specific that you're looking for. Filtering is pretty instant. So you can, when you filter data in a worksheet, but let me back up. If you've got formulas and functions and values within your data, even though you filter it, your values don't change. You can filter one or more columns of data, like I stated, and you can control not only what you see, but what you want to exclude. So to give you an example, you've got data, and within your cell or your data table, you can go to, under the ribbon, when you look at the Excel ribbon, you go to data, the data ribbon, and then choose filter under sort and filter. Once the filter is toggle is selected, small arrows will appear like here in this example. That'll let you know that you've got your filters on. Filter is just a toggle on and off. Choose the column you want to filter, and it filters your data for you. Okay. When you're using filters, not only can you just filter the data for viewing, but you can look at something that equals a certain amount, does not equal, is greater than. You can look at your top 10, your above average, your below average items within your data. So even if you have hundreds of lines of data, you can filter it down easily to look at specific pieces. So just within the search box on the filters, you just go to number filters and select the appropriate one. Okay, so I have an Excel spreadsheet, just like with the first session, where I can give you some examples and walk you through some of this. So if I've got this data, I don't have to select my entire table to turn on filters. As long as I have no blank columns in my data is clean, I can just turn on the filters. I can go to data and turn on filters, and there it is. Then I can choose. I want to filter and just see the items for pencil. I could filter it again and just look at central region. So that's what I mean when you can do a filter within a filter. If you have a lot of filters going and you can't remember what you filtered and you want to just unfilter everything quickly, just turn your toggle off and it unfilters everything. Then you can toggle it back on. Okay. Now, if in here, I can go into the special things. So even if it's not just on cost, so if I want to look at number filters, something that equal to, it's greater than the top 10, the average, the below average, I can do a custom filter. I can also do that on the text columns. So I can go into text filters that equals a certain thing, does not equal, begins with, ends with, or contains. So say if I want to say filter anything that contains a T, apparently none of those words, none of those names contained a T, and it did not. I didn't even look at that when I did that. That's funny. But say if I want to, contains an N, it'll filter for just the names that contain the letter N in it. Okay. If you have a long list of data, and when you go to filter, your list goes on and on and on, like in my example over here, how the number list is going on and on and on, I can scroll up and down and I can look for that, exactly what I'm looking for, but I can also type and it will narrow it down to what I type. So you don't have to scroll up and down, unselect and select just the one you're looking for. Just type in what you're looking for and it will narrow it for you. So those are just some different ways that you can use filters. Now to select them all again, I can do this, or I can say clear the filter from the region, or again, I can just toggle on and off and clear all filters at one time. Now, if I were to filter something here, I can, if I filter by dates, look at the dates, look at all the options of filtering. I can filter next quarter, last quarter, next month, last month, next week, year to date. You have different options depending on the data that you're trying to filter. Now, do you see how I've got some cells that are highlighted in gray. I can also filter based on a color. If you notice, because I have color in there, that becomes an option where I didn't have this option before. So I can filter things for the color, or I can filter things without a color. So again, it gives you different options to look at different data. I can also sort by the color. So if I wanted all the gray on top, it would sort it that way. So I can use filters to also do my sorting if it's a single column sort. Now, if I want a multi-column sort, I can't use my filters for it, but I can use my filters if I just want to sort one column. Like if I want to sort it by date, I can sort it newest to oldest, oldest to new. So you can use filters in a number of ways. And I'll show you some tricks in a minute when we get to some of the formulas on why using filters can be so beneficial. So I'm going to pause right now and ask if anybody has any questions. You can either raise your hand and Lori will unmute you, or you can put a question in the chat or comments or anything like that.
And I have you guys right now with the option to be able to unmute yourself if you'd like to talk.
Can you show me how to filter by the text or numbers? I missed it in my video. I was having problems with my video.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if depending on either one of these, I can turn on. So I've got filters on this one. So if I want to filter by the number, again, as long as your filter's up, I can go into the number filters right here, and it gives me my options. I can filter for anything. So if I want to see anything greater than 20, I can do that. Well, every one of them were greater than 20, so it didn't rule anything out. But I could also do a number filter. I could say between. So give me anything between 30 and 45, or let's say 65. And it's going to filter it for that. Is that what you were asking about?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, somebody's saying what? I saw something pop up in chat. What is that?
Yeah, it says your version of Excel looks different than mine. How do I tell if there is an updated version?
You can go to File and go to Account. And this is what I have. I've got version 2002 build 125727.2880. So you can see what version you are, but if you think you're not up on the latest version, reach out. I'm assuming you're from one of the colleges, reach out to your technical group and ask them. Thank you, Deb. It doesn't mean that it's from 2002. Okay. It's just the number it's been given. Version, so it's version 2002, not from fiscal year or calendar year 2002. Is that right, Deb? Okay, so you're LSC. So I would reach out to your OTS tech and see if they could tell you why it might look different. What looks different? Is it some of my ribbons up here? Because I do have some special add-ins on my Excel. Is that what you're talking about? Is some of my ribbon stuff? Yes, ribbons are different. Okay, so Smart View is a customized ribbon because I pull data from Hyperion and I can pull it using Excel because I'm considered one of the super users for Hyperion. And then I've added the Power Pivot add-in option so that I can do Power Pivot instead of just normal pivot tables. I can do Power Pivot tables. So you can add in customized items if it's something you know how to use or want to learn to use. And you can do that by going to File, go to your Options, and go into Add-ins. I went to COM add-ins and say go, and here's the options. So here's where I added Power Pivot for Excel. So that's probably what looks different then, is I have some customized ribbons added to my Excel for my use. Any other questions? If not, we're going to move on. You're welcome, Dana. Okay. So that was about filters. Now let's talk about conditional formatting and how you could use conditional formatting. So what this does, it allows you to automatically apply a formatting, whether it's colors, icons, data bars, to one or more cell based on a cell value. And there's defaulted conditional formatting rules, or you can add your own rule if you know how to build one. So a couple of things you can do is conditional formatting, like for here, if you wanted to see format cells that are less than $5,000. So everything's highlighted that's less than $5,000. I can also look at duplicate values to highlight duplicate values, so I can see if I've got duplicate values in my data that I want to clean up. So let me go over to my Excel file, and let's look at some conditional formatting. Okay, so I've got my table. I can Control A to select my table, all my data. And under the Home ribbon, here under Styles is conditional formatting. So I can say highlight cells that are greater than, less than, between, or equal to. So let's say if I want to highlight a cell that's greater than $5,000, it highlights it. Now, the reason it's highlighted the names is each one of these have an item that's greater than 5,000. If I do not want that to highlight, I would just highlight not the entire table, but just my number data. Then I could go to conditional formatting, less than $5,000, and it would highlight the cells that are less than $5,000. Another thing I could do is top bottom rules. So I could say highlight the top 10 items, the top 10%, the bottom, the above average. So let's do the top 10%, and there it is. So those are the cells where the amounts are in the top 10%. Other things on conditional formatting, you can look at data bars, where you can do a gradient fill. So if I highlight this, what it's doing is this is adding a colored data bar to represent the value in the cell. The higher the value, the longer the bar. You can do that on each of these things. You can choose your different color. You can do a solid fill versus a gradient. You can go in and do more rules. You can also do color scales, which that's a little overwhelming. So what this is, it says to apply a color gradient to a range. The color indicates where each cell value falls within that range. Then again, I can go into so you can use all these icons as well within your conditional formatting. One thing I like to use conditional formatting for is to determine if I've got duplicated records. If any of you are familiar with when you go to data and you say remove duplicates, the system, Excel chooses which of the duplicates to remove. You may not want that because maybe when you do remove duplicates, you can select, okay, only select if that's the same. Well, maybe that's not what you want to remove. If you want to control which records to remove, use your conditional formatting first. So I can go into conditional formatting, highlight cells, duplicate values. And by the way, on any of these, if you don't like the red, you can change the color to whatever color you want. You can even do your own custom. You can border it versus coloring it, whatever you want to do. Okay, but now this is chosen, it has found the duplicate records for me. So say if I had other data over here that was different, but I only wanted it to see what was duplicated here, then I could control which set of data I want to delete. Okay. So are there any questions about conditional formatting or how you might could use conditional formatting? Again, raise your hand, unmute yourself, talk, ask it in the chat, however you want to do it. No? Is everybody understanding? Give me a thumbs up. We good? Okay, good. Well, then I'm going to keep going. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was data validation. This is another function off the ribbon. Okay, so data validation allows you to restrict or validate user input on a worksheet. So say you're using Excel to create a form that you want people to fill in. You can actually put your data validations on there, limit of 10 characters. If it's more than 10 characters, they get an error and they can't fill it in. If it has, you can put a drop-down list that they can choose from so that when they fill in the data, your data is consistent and you don't have to go back and clean it up later on. Okay, so some examples are you can only allow numeric or text values in a specific cell, only allow numbers within a specified range, allow data entry of a specified length. You could restrict dates and times outside of a given range. You can even restrict entries to a selection from a drop-down list. So that's what you can use data validation for. So here are some examples. This is what the data validation screen, pop-up screen looks like. So here's an example of putting a list. So they could only choose from the options that are in the list. There's 3 options here. This is what it looks like in the data validation pop-out screen. This is how you can create your list. And then you just check that it's an in-cell drop-down. That's one way to do it. There are multiple ways you can do this. Then you can set an input message and you could put an error alert if they try to go outside of that. An automatic pop-up will show up with an error directing them what they need to do next. Okay, so let's look at that in Excel. So you've got the data validation. So here I've got data. Okay. So if you see, I have selected this cell and a message comes up. I hope y'all can see that. It's kind of small, but let me enlarge it. This little pop-up, it says item number must be 5 characters long. So if I enter an item number of 3 characters, it gives me, this is my little pop-up error message saying item must be 5 characters. So I can say retry and put in my 5 characters. So that's one type of data validation that you can use. Another type is I can do a drop down where I have to choose. So in other words, if somebody tries to type in their own word, again, I set it to where an error would pop up saying that value doesn't match your restrictions. Try it again. Now, I've got 2 drop-down menus. One is based on within the field and one is based on a list. And let me explain those to you. So where data validation is under data in the ribbon, right in the data tools to the right of remove duplicates. So this is the data validation screen. Okay. So I need to be on the cell that I want to put a data validation in. So let me I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm going to clear those data validations and we'll go from there. So I want to put a data validation in this cell. And I want to do it as a drop-down list. So I can go in here and allow any value. No, I want a list. And I'm going to do it in the cell drop-down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type what my options are. Complete, pending, cancel, other. So I can just type them with a comma in between. When you type them in here, that the comma separates your options of your drop-down list. Okay? So if I say okay, you saw this little arrow popped up, and here are my options. Now, if I want that option to be on every cell, I can use autofill and drag it down, and now it's on every one of these. You do have to copy it into the cells that you want it to be in, or it won't be there. Okay? So I uncopied it. I just have it in the first one where I can do my drop down. I could also set one up based on a list versus being in here. So I can still say list, but instead of in cell drop down, well, no, I still want an in cell drop down, but instead of typing it in, I'm going to do that and select my range where I want my list. Say I do a range that includes some blank rows. Then my list, you see how I have blanks, and then I can come back, add more to my list, and then they're in my options. So that's two ways you can do drop-down list within data validation. Now within that data validation, I can do an input message, okay? I can add an error alert. You don't have to. So now that that cell's selected, it tells me what I need to do. Choose from the drop-down list. If I try to type in my own thing, it's going to give me my error because I set the error message. But again, I do not have to set an error message, but if I do not use that drop-down, it's not going to let me, and I may not know why it's not going to let me. So those are things to consider. And again, once you set it, you want to drag it down to your other cells so that when those are selected, the option is there, or your data validation is there, and whatever you set up. Are there any questions about setting a drop-down list within a data validation? Everybody good? Man, I miss being face-to-face where I can see people's faces and know that, we're all good. Okay, so another type of data validation is what I did over here. So if I want an item number, okay, again, I can go into data validation. I can allow any value. I can make it so if it's money, I can make it be whole number only, no cents. Must have a decimal. How many decimals? A list must be a date. The date can be between certain dates. It can be not between certain dates. It has to be equal to. Great, you have all these options. I can do a text length, and I could say it needs to be between this and this, or if it needs to be equal to, I can say that. So this needs to be equal to 5 characters. Then I can put my input message. Item number must be 5 characters in length. Again, I can add an error alert if I want. Okay. So again, it gives me the message. If I don't do that, it's going to give me my error. So nope, that's wrong. Do it again. And then I can put in whatever I need to put in That's too many digits, so that's still wrong. And there we go. So data validations are good, like I said, if you're creating a form that others are going to be inputting data into, especially the drop-down boxes, if you want the data to be consistent where you do not have to clean it up later, then you have clean data to work with and review and analyze. So one more time, any questions on data validation, or are you all good? Everybody good? Okay, good. Everybody's good. I'm seeing the thumbs up. So I'm going to go back over to the PowerPoint. Next, we're going to get into some advanced functions. But before we do, I want everybody to open up the chat. I have a question for you to answer. So Lori, you ready to watch my chat? So here is the question, everybody. Okay. What ribbon function can be used to identify duplicate records? Again, what ribbon function can be used to identify duplicated records? Anybody?
They're starting, a couple of them are starting to come in now.
Okay.
Remove duplicates, filters, data.
Do we have them all in? Okay, so what are the answers, Lori, that we've got?
Yeah, the first one just says remove duplicates, so I'm not sure if that was, and then we have a couple of people said filters, one said data, and one said the conditional format.
Okay, so the answer is the conditional formatting.
Okay.
Y'all remember when we went in there that it's the conditional formatting that you can use to identify. Remove duplicates actually removes your duplicates without identifying them. But to identify duplicates, it's the conditional formatting going to highlight and duplicate values. Okay, so who got that right, Lori?
That is Teresa Benavides.
Okay, Teresa, you're going to get a t-shirt from us. So work with, send your address in a private chat to Lori, and she'll make sure you get a t-shirt mailed to you. Congrats. Okay, how are we on time? We're good. Okay, so we're going to talk about some advanced functions. Everybody ready? Because we've got several of them, and we're going to go on and go through them. So the first one is VLOOKUP. I hear a lot of people ask me, and I get a lot of questions about how do you use VLOOKUP, which I think is interesting because I personally don't use it, but a lot of people are very interested in how to use VLOOKUP. So VLOOKUP, even though it's one of the most widely used functions in Excel, there are other ways to get the information. So VLOOKUP lets you look up a value in a column on the left and returns information in another column to the right if it finds a match. So basically VLOOKUP is looking for a match in your data, that you're whatever you're requesting. Okay, so VLOOKUP supports approximate and exact matching and wildcards. So let's look at what the VLOOKUP function says. So this is an example of the VLOOKUP formula. So you've got VLOOKUP. The first part is, what do you want to look for? So whatever you're looking for is in column A1. Excuse me. The next part of the function, it says B through C, where do you want to look for it at? So what you're looking for is in column A1, but you want to look for it in columns B and C. If you find it, how many columns to the right do you want to get a value? And that's 2. So 2 columns to the right of where you find it. So 2 columns from column A, you want to get the value. And then the last part is either true or false. That's the only options you have. And so false means do you want or basically, do you want an exact amount, exact match? That's a true. Or do you want an approximate match? An approximate match would be false. So that's how you read the formula itself. So let's go here. So VLOOKUP, the V is for vertical, okay? And the purpose of the VLOOKUP, again, is to get information from a table organized like this example. So it's only going to look at vertical data. So if I've got a data with order numbers, customer IDs, amounts, name, and the state, that's my data it's going to look at. And VLOOKUP only looks to the right. So if I'm looking for an order number, it can give me any information to the right of that order number. But if I'm looking at an amount, it's only going to be able to look at the information to the right of the amount. So I want you to be very clear on that it can only look to the right of your data for your answer. So if what you're looking for is in D, you may want to move that to the first column so it can look at your data to the right, because it's only going to look at what's to the right and not what's to the left. So in this example here, it says using the order number in column B as the lookup value, VLOOKUP can get and provide the customer ID, the amount, the name, and the state. So again, it only looks to the right. So this example, VLOOKUP of what I'm looking for is order number 1004 in B, from between B5 and F9. Put it in column 4, or column 4 is where I want the answer from. So column 4 is name, and I don't have to have an exact match, but an approximate match. So what it found is the 4th column over for order 1004, it found Sue Martin, and that's the answer it returns. Does that make sense to everybody? Before I go into some examples, I want to make sure that y'all are okay with how this is worded and how it's laid out. Okay, I saw some thumbs up there. If you're not sure, put something in the comments or raise your hand and Lori will watch for those. But let me go over to Excel, okay? And let's look at VLOOKUP. So here is my data. And I've actually set up, this is a good way to use VLOOKUP. You put your formula here. You put your formula here, that's what you want to get. That's the answer you're looking for. But it's based on my serial number. So if I do it like this versus, in this example, it put the order number within the formula. If you don't put it within the formula, then you can change it. So let me show you what my formula is here. Instead of putting that serial number 149534, I've put that cell. Then I can change that and look up various serial numbers just by entering a new serial number. Okay, so my formula is VLOOKUP of I3 for this whole database, this whole table. I want the answer from the 4th column, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's the rep that it's going to give me, and I want an approximate match. So if I enter serial number 149534, that's the rep. But if I change it, doing it this way, I could change it 159119, and it changes the answer for me. 135687, it gives me not applicable. And the reason it gave me not applicable is that serial number does not exist within my data. Is everybody with me on this? Yes? Questions? Okay, so I'm getting a lot of thumbs up. Yay, thank you. So That is what VLOOKUP is for. Now, if I wanted to change this to look up the item, it's only going to look at the columns after it. So keep that in mind. It only looks to the right. So where you're looking needs to be in the left in order to use all of your data. Now, based on what we've already covered, does anybody know of another way that you could find the data without using a VLOOKUP? Anybody want to gander a guess? Okay. Control F, use the find, yes. So Control F is find. So I could find something, but it's something we've talked about within this session. What else could I use to find a specific serial number? Filter, exactly. So if I turned my filters on, I could go right here and say 159119. There it is. And there's my information. I can do it that way. I can use the control find and I don't have to build a formula. But again, that's why I don't use VLOOKUP, because there's so many ways. But that's the thing with Excel. There's usually more than one way to do things in Excel. And so you need to find the one that works best for you. But I wanted to share VLOOKUP because I do get a lot of questions about it. Okay, if there's no questions about VLOOKUP, I'm going to move on to the next one. Okay, so the next function I want to talk about is left and right. There's also a mid. Mid's a little bit confusing, but I use left and right a lot, and I'll throw mid in there, but I mainly showed left and right on these. So what the left and right functions do is it lets you extract a given number of characters, whether they're alpha or numeric, from a specific cell string. Okay, you can use the left function if you want to extract characters starting at the left of the text. You use right if you want to extract the characters from the right of the string. And you use mid if you want to extract characters in the middle of it. Okay, so in this example here, this is for left. New York, here's your text here. So New York, I request, this is the left is 3 characters of New York, so it gives you new. If you select 8 characters, I'm trying to get the hiccups and I'm fighting them, y'all, sorry. 8 characters would give you New York. If I only want the standard 5 digits of a zip code, I could do left for 5 and get that. And if I only wanted the area code, so the first 3 on the left, I could use left to get it. And so I can use a formula to get it versus having to manually break it out. Okay, so let me show you a few examples of the left or the right. So if you're with Lone Star, you recognize this data, right? And so we know when we pull out data, we have it comes with the Fund 10, that type of thing. This is through SmartView. But say I do a lot of files when I'm looking at budget, okay? Because we've got the 6,000 accounts and the 7,000 accounts and the 8,000 accounts. I want to be able to apply a filter so that if I'm providing this to somebody, they can filter for just the 7,000s and then narrow it down from there. Or they could filter it just for the 7,100 or 7,200 or 7,300. So what I've done in these columns is set up some of these left. So in the account for 2-digit, my formula is left this cell the first 2 digits. So basically I'm telling it, give me the first 2 characters, or in this case, digits, of that cell. And that's all I want to see. Okay? And that's 61. Then I can autofill all the way down. So if this was blank, I have my formula. I can double click my autofill and it'll copy the formula all the way down. Now this left is the first character. So it's this cell, the first character from the left. And that's all I want to see. And then that gives me the 6. Now this one, because this is F10 dash and then operating. This is a combination. This is actually a nested formula. I don't know if y'all can see this. Let me pull this out and put it. So this is a nested formula. A nested formula is a formula within a formula. So what I'm actually saying is you do the innermost first. So I'm saying pull the left and then pull the right. So what this formula is saying is go to H3, which is this cell right here. Pull the first 3 characters from the left. So it pulls F10. Then go to the right and pull the first 2 characters coming from the right, which leaves me with just 10. So I can use a formula to do that versus having to separate the data out into different cells. Instead of using the delimited and then not adding not importing those fields, I can use a formula to pull out just the number for me. And then again, I can copy that down. Then if I put a filter on this, so then I could filter for just the 7s, and that's all it's going to give me. Then I could filter it even further if I wanted to look at my travel accounts. Boom, there it is. And it makes my data much easier to analyze and review. If I type in the formula, okay, whoop. Okay, Kara, Lori, you're going to have to tell me what that comment was.
Yeah, no problem. It says if I type in the formula, is it case specific?
No.
Such as, do I need to do equals right versus equals right, right in all caps versus lowercase?
No.
So is it case specific?
It is not case specific. So if I do this, here's the thing. If I type it in and I do right, see, it brings it up. And then if I select it, Excel converts it to all caps. Okay. So if I wanted to do right and I want the far right characters, it's going to give me park. You see what I did there? And if you're unsure, like I showed in the last session, if you're unsure, use the wizard. So either on the home page, do the drop down and go to more functions, or you can go to formulas and go to insert function here, and you get this wizard. Let this wizard walk you through it. So I can type in here, I could do right. You're gonna have to change this to all because it defaults to your most recent, and it brings it up. And then I could let this walk me through it. So this says text is the string that contains the characters you want to extract. Okay, so if I do this, now then this is asking me specifies how many characters you want to extract, 1 if omitted. So if I leave it blank, it's automatically going to put 1 in. Okay, but say I want 4, and I can say okay. And so it pulled the first 4 from the right, and that's why I got eats from retreats. So if you're unsure how to write the formula, use your wizard. Does that help answer your question that you had? Good. Are there any other questions about the left or the right function? Okay, so it seems like we're good. So I'm going to move on. Subtotal function. Okay, I love using this with filters, and I'm going to explain why. But let's talk about what subtotal is. So the Excel subtotal function provides a subtotal of values of the data. Okay, but within the subtotal function, you can do all of these. You can do average, count, count A, max, min, product, sum, variance, all of those functions you can do within the subtotal function. So I wouldn't have to do a sum total. I could do a subtotal function with a sum action. Okay, so here is the formula, equals subtotal. So then you do the function number and then your reference and then your reference to. So the function number is a number that specifies which function within this table right here that you're going to use to calculate your subtotals. Okay. Reference 1 is a named range or a reference to the subtotal, and reference 2 is optional. Okay, if you want to do more. So subtotal behavior is controlled by the function number argument. If there are 11 functions available, each have 2 options. And the option is if you use one, or if you use this column, it'll include anything that's hidden. So even if you have hidden rows of data, it's still going to include those amounts in your calculation. But if you don't want it to include rows you have hidden, then you use the 101 to ignore, or opposite. If you want to ignore the hidden ones, you use 101. If you want to include any rows that you've hidden, you use 1. Okay? And that's what this explains here. So the subtotal is designed to work with vertical data. In horizontal ranges, values in hidden columns are always calculated. So if I used it on a horizontal, you can't don't exclude hide, okay? In filtered lists though, so if you use filters with this formula, the subtotal always ignores the hidden values rows, regardless. So when you use a filter and you filter your data, it does not include those hidden data points in it. And I'll show you an example, okay? Now, my personal recommendation, if you use this function in conjunction with filters, put your subtotal calculation at the top of your data, and I'll explain and I'll show why. Okay? So again, here's an example. So this subtotal, it's a count, and it's counting based on my filter. So let's go into my Excel and look at a couple of examples. So if I look at, so here's my data. Again, here are my functions. This is what can be done. Okay? So items visible. Right now, my formula is subtotal, and it's 103. So 103 will ignore anything hidden, and it's to count. And count A is count it if there's something in the field. If the field is blank, it will not count it. Regular count counts every field, whether there's something in the cell or not. Okay? So if that counts, say if I filter this from Montana, watch my number, it changes. Okay? Now, it's always going to change on a filter. But because I used ignore hidden, if I've grouped these together to hide them. So if I reduce my group, my number changes because it ignores anything that's hidden. If I had used the 1 instead of, the 3 instead of the 103, it would include those hidden rows. Okay? Now, that's only if I hide them. It doesn't matter which one I use if I use the filters to hide data. So here on the gross sales, and one of the reasons I say put your formulas at the top versus the bottom is it doesn't matter how long your data is, you can see it without scrolling up and down and scrolling up and down, okay? So this one is subtotal and it's 9 and it's sum. So this is subtotaling the whole thing. So if I wanted to do sum, so let me show you, if I just did equal sum and did the same formula with the sum function, it shows me the same. So this is the sum function, right? This is not. But if I filter out, I only want to look at France, Mexico, and US. when I use a sum function, it still totals in everything. But if I use the subtotal function, it filters out what I've hidden now with my filter, and it gives me a total of just what's appearing. Any questions about the subtotal? I use this a lot. I've built a budget worksheet for my campus to use, and I have these subtotal functions across the top, and so people can filter for their department and see just their totals. Because using the subtotal functions, those totals adjust every time you filter. But are there any questions on how to use the subtotal function?
I'm confused about the box to the right where you have function, include, hidden, ignore hidden.
Okay.
Did you have to type that in that way?
No. So let's walk through using the function of subtotal. Okay. So if I look at the wizard's telling me what function number, and this box on the right are my function numbers. Okay. Is the number 1 to 11 that specifies the summary function for the subtotal. Let me cancel this for a minute because I've got some stuff filtered. Let me do that again. So if I do subtotal, so it's telling me what number do I want to use. I mainly use this column, the include hidden versus the ignore hidden. So if you want it to include your hidden columns or hidden rows, you use this number as your function number. If you want it to ignore any hidden rows, you're going to use this function number. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Then my reference is, what do I want to total? Lori, it looked like some other questions came in on chat.
Yeah, it said, did you come up with that function box, or is that provided somehow? And then yeah.
Yeah, this box was, it's an Excel thing. It's provided. I actually, because I got the table, I pulled it off the web just so I would have a clean, concise table to show you guys in the presentation.
And then someone also asked, but you need to know the functions that are in that image box.
Yes, you need to know what function you can use. Yes. But what I could do is because I use it in conjunction with filters, it means my number adjusts automatically without having to change my formula. And that's what I like about it, especially using it in conjunction with filters. But yes, you do have to know what function you're looking for. You know, if you want to count, if you want to average, if you want to sum. But once you start using them and you know which ones you use, you'll memorize them. I know that sum is 9. Okay, that I use mainly sum for the most part. But my point is you can use average without having to do an average calculation. You can do sum without using a sum calculation, because again, those calculations include any rows. So even if I came in here and I hid these rows of data, a sum function would still include it. An average function would still include it, but the subtotal function with one of these would not include it. Does that make sense? So any other questions about how to use subtotal? Because we are almost out of time and have a couple of more to cover. Okay. So let me do some housekeeping real quick. I mean, we do have 20 minutes till the next session. If you want to, I'll hang around if you want to hang around to finish going over it. But if you want to drop off, I understand. But just a few housekeeping. If you drop off, first of all, thank you so much for participating and attending. We appreciate you coming. Please make sure you participate in a breakout session from the number 3 choices and attend the closing remarks as well. And then if you have any specific questions for me, if you go to the program under my bio, Kim Anderson, my email is there, and feel free to email me. Okay? But For those that want to hang around, I'm going to keep going. I've got just a couple of more to show. So concatenate, or now also known as concate, there are things that, Lori, I guess you're watching those comments that are coming through.
I am, yes, I got
Okay.
it.
Okay, so using the concatenate function, so what it can do, it combines data. So if you've got data in 3 different cells that you want to combine into one cell, you can use this function to combine that data. Okay, so if there's bears in one column and dolphins in the other column, I can use this formula to combine them into one cell. Okay, now if I want to put in a space, or like bears and dolphins, you can include additional text. You just have to put it in quotation marks in your formula. And you can include that, so that if you look at this formula, it's saying concatenate A1 and B1, and that's my result. You can also use the ampersand symbol to do the same thing. So if I wanted bears and dolphins, I could do equal A1 ampersand B1, and it would give me this same answer. So let me show you real quick what concatenate is. So say I've got first and last name, but I want them combined into one. If I use my function wizard and I go to I can use either one. They work the same way. My understanding is concatenate eventually is going to go away and it's going to be concat completely. Okay. But I can use either one. And if I use the wizard, so it's asking me text 1, what's the first cell that I want to combine? It's this. But if I just do then text 2 and put the next cell, they're just going to be Alice and Carol with no spaces, no commas, no anything, right? So what I could do is I could put a comma and then a space. Whoop, didn't mean to hit, I hit the wrong key. Sorry, let me go back and do that again. So I could do comma and a space, and then the next one, and it gives you right here, it shows you what it's going to look like. Okay, if I didn't put the space behind the comma, it puts a space in there already for you. So depending on what you're doing, what you're adding, like if I put the word and, it would not add a space. I would have to add it. But a comma, Excel is intuitive. It knows you need a space after a comma. So it automatically adds the comma for you. But if I wanted to put and, see, this is how it runs together. So I would want to put a space before and to say Allison and Carol, because it shows you what it's going to look like. Now, what if I wanted to do first name first, then last name? I could also do that without having to rearrange my columns. And I really wouldn't need this one, except I would want a space. So I could put a space, and that's what it would look like. Oh, I didn't realize I had the other still in there. Okay, so that is how you can use that formula to combine multiple cells into one. I could also use the ampersand, this, I could put a space, ampersand, a space, so any text you have to put in quotes. Dadgummit. Oh. I keep hitting the wrong key. Okay, it's not liking what I'm doing for some reason, but I could do this, ampersand, this, and it would combine it as well. So you can use either way to combine data from 2 different cells. Any questions on concatenate?
Kim, there is a question that came in that says, what is the function when you want to separate the names?
You mean if they were in one cell? What do you mean separate the names? Can you
Yes. So you see how you have salesperson Kathy Albertson. So if the name is together, how do you separate them to the last and the first name?
Okay, so actually I did that in the first session, but let me show you real quick. There's actually a couple of ways you can do it. So let me put this over here. I'm just going to copy the values as if that's where it was, okay? Because I can't do it with a formula, okay? I need to do it with just raw data. So say I had this and you wanted to separate it, right? So you've got name and you wanted to separate it into last and first, right? Is that what you're saying?
Oops.
Is that what?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can use the delimiter. You can go to data, text to columns. And because it's based on a comma, you can do that. And it would separate it. Okay. But you can also use flash fill. So if I had, let me show you, I'm going to copy this down. So say I wanted to separate it out, I could do Albertson. Okay, it's not going to do it because they're the same names. Sorry, hold on. Let me pull up the other file. I've got a example right there. Let me show you. Okay, so see how this data is all split? I mean, all in one, but I want it to be first name, last name, company name. So I could use the data text to columns and separate it that way. Or I could just come in here and if I type Nancy, Andy, Excel's intuitive, and then if I just hit enter, it's intuitive, it's guessing what I'm trying to do, and it puts the last name there. And then I could do Smith, or the first name there. I could do North, and it does the same thing. Do you see what I'm doing?
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So you can separate it that way, or I could separate it through text to columns using the delimited. And I could separate it that way.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Any other questions about concatenate? If not, I want to show you just a couple of nested formulas. So again, these are other nested formulas. So this is an example of sum within an average. Okay, so this formula sums a set of numbers only if the average of another set of numbers is greater than 50. Otherwise, it returns a 0. Well, you can nest multiple things within things. So how many of you have ever, especially during our budget cycle here at Lone Star, where everything in Hyperion has to be in whole dollars, but if you do a calculation and it may come up with cents, but you want it rounded to whole dollars, you might do this might be a sum formula, then you insert another column to round it. Well, you can just nest them within each other. So this formula here, it sums E times F and gets a number, and then it rounds it to 0 decimals. So you can save yourself time by nesting your formulas. Here are some other examples. So let's use this one down here. If you're doing grades, you could say, okay, so students, here are the scores. You could say, well, if D is greater than 89, it's a C. I mean, greater than 89, it's an A. If D is greater than 79, it's a B. If D is greater than 69, it's a C, and so forth. And it'll automatically turn that score into a letter grade. This one is telling me if they get a bonus. So this is another nested. It says it's an if, but it's nested with an or statement. So if or B2, so the number of cells, is greater than 4 and or C2 is greater than or equal to 9,000, then yes, they get a bonus. If either one of them are if they're false, they do not. So again, you can build these nesting formulas. So this one is a way to calculate commission. So let me show you if I go to Excel real quick. And here's some nested formulas. So nested sum and rounding. So if everybody needs to drop it, you got 10 minutes. If I understand if you want to drop off, but if not, I'm going to keep going. There's still some people on. So if I calculated, this would be the sum. If I did a sum formula, and this would be the rounded amount. But this is with the rounded. This is both of them together. So I wouldn't have to do this formula. I wouldn't have to do two of them if I nested it. So the innermost is your first calculation, and then it calculates outward. So in this formula, it calculates the sum, and then it rounds that answer. Again, I can do an if statement. So an if statement is a conditional. This is a pretty long one. I don't know how well y'all can see that one, but it says if L18, the units sold, is less than or equal to 5,000, they get 0 commission. If L18, I'm sorry, I'm not talking about gross sales. If L18 is less than or equal to 29,999, they get 5% commission. If it's less than or equal to 49.99, they get 7.5% commission. Anyway, you can build in these if, and then just copy your formula down, and it tells you how much commission they each owe. This is an if or. So this says if I-18 is greater than or equal to 2,500, so the units sold, or L18 is greater than or equal to 30,000, then they get a 1% bonus. So you can put, formulas within formulas and nest them together to have your calculations. So here's one for those familiar with Lone Star. Okay, so this is a conditional if statement nested with a left statement, which we already talked about. So this is saying if left of Y5 is the one digit, left of I5, one digit, is a 6, then put salary and benefits. If the first digit of left of Y is a 7, put operating. If it's neither, put not applicable. So if I drag this formula down, when it gets to the 7, it automatically states it's operating. So if somebody knew and they didn't know what the 6s were salary and benefits and the 7s were operating, I could put the formula in there to give them the verbiage. So again, you can nest various formulas within each other. Any questions on nesting formulas? And yes, it takes some time. You got to think about it. But you can also use your wizard to help you figure these nesting formulas out. But they can save you time of having to do multiple formulas to get the same answer. So for those of you that are left, are there any additional questions? There's only a few of you still left, and I apologize that this ran over, but it's the way it happened.
Kim, you want to do a giveaway really quick for the people that are left?
Yes, so everybody that's left. So get ready to answer in chat. What does the V stand for in VLOOKUP? Carolyn. Now, that is right, vertical. Anybody else remember that? Or did I give it the victory? I love it, Deb. It could be victory if you did the formula right. Okay. Well, congrats, Carolyn. Send your address to Lori and she'll get you a t-shirt. So thank you all so much for participating. Again, my apologies for running over. And I hope you learned something. I enjoy doing this. And don't participate in one of the last session and the closing comments. They would love it for you to attend those. Thank you. Enjoy your day.